We are live. Everything is looking good. Awesome. Welcome, Mr. Peter McQueen. It is awesome to have you here. My name is Holden Stephan Roy, and this is Bridge the Gap, the show where we like to talk to super interesting people, kind of walk through their lives a little bit, and get to know them a little bit better. Now, it started off a lot more with the creative professional sphere and a selfish interest to understand how to do what I do a little bit better, but then along the way, the local election situation started, and it was like, say word, what we do is very translatable to other like occupations for the most part. A couple parts maybe not there, but a lot of it was driven from like, I thought to myself, the last time Montreal came through with an election, I did not know who to vote for, and there was not a lot of good coverage of people on the flyers around me, so you end up voting for a mayoral candidate. And then I realized I'm in my 30s and I don't know anything about local politics. I now know there's a lot of love for parks in local politics, but prior to that, I didn't know that, like, even what the issues were. I know that most people complain about stuff that, like, is probably not the, NDG's problem. It might be a Quebec issue. There's a lot of confusion. And at the end of the day, at least here, it's not going to be simple to figure out who Peter McQueen is. Apparently, you're a little legendary. Like, you would know enough, but almost nobody, like, your voice is legendary. I've heard stories like, is he really sound like? And I'm like, sound like what? I wasn't even paying attention. But like, people don't.
My radio voice, Holden. It's something.
It's pretty good, man. I like it a lot. But like, yeah. So it's like, who is the man behind Peter McQueen? Like the legend. And that's kind of like, I guess what I can do. I'm not really good at normal political interview. I don't even know what they are. They're probably not my cup of tea. So it's really just like the story of who you are, and then it'll just kind of lead into stuff like what you do and why people should care enough to like re-elect you. I believe you're currently a city councillor. I might be wrong about that.
City councillor for Eastern NDG, and have been for 12 years, so seeking my fourth term. The first 8 years, of course, were in opposition. Behind, there was the Tremblay administration, the first term, Tremblay-Applebaum, and then the second administration was Cote-Des and Cote-Des-Neiges. So I was all by my lonely here in Cote-Des-Neiges NDG as an opposition guy. And then, of course, this one first mandate of Valérie Plante was, with the ruling party, trying to get things done. But unfortunately, there was we had some difficulties, our local administration, of course, with the Sue Montgomery thing. So, and of course with COVID. So I think that, it wasn't exactly a full mandate. It was more like a half a mandate.
Definitely a fair statement. That makes you extra interesting too, because like we did talk to Christian Arsenault, who's like in office this term, but you like got a decade plus in office, so you have more context than anybody else. Like no offense to the candidates who have not served, but they kind of have a limit to what they know in terms of general conversation. And then
okay, I can say a couple things. First of all, I do want to do a shout out to Christian Arsenault and thank him for his service in NDG. Obviously, we were all shocked a week and a half ago when he suddenly announced a mental illness problem and that he would have to leave his functions as councillor and withdraw from the election. We wish him the best. And I personally, I'm not saying I agree with every last thing the guy said, but I agreed with a lot more than most other people we'll discuss later. And I was sad to see him go. I thought he was definitely a voice for NDG. He was definitely a smart, strong, hardworking guy, bilingual. So it's definitely discouraging to see a guy put that much effort in suddenly not be there anymore as a hope for the future of NDG. So
that's a big statement. I like that. I like the way that you went there with that. I was a little...
Because we need that next generation coming up. I'm 58. Christian was, 32-ish.
Yeah, he's my age.
It's a pretty big gap, and we need some younger people stepping up and learning the ropes. It's not going to happen overnight. I've learned my job over several mandates. It's only normal, and we do need some younger people stepping up. So I hope other young people will not be discouraged with what happened.
That's a good statement. I also want young people to care. I didn't even realize how not that hard it is to run if you apply yourself until this season. So, that's a really interesting point that you brought with that. But still, I do want to kind of cover, like, you're a 58. That's like definitely, you might be the oldest person I've talked to on all of my shows, like, with no disrespect. So that makes me excited because you come from like a different time.
I do want to say that in this council in Cote-Des-Neiges NDG, I was in the younger half.
Oh
Sue
boy.
Montgomery, Marvin Rocha, and Magda Foviano are all older than me, so I was in the younger three.
Say a word. That's like we saw the Suburban the other day, and like we picked it up as like almost a joke and read the Suburban, and it was like, oh, say a word. This is not a newspaper that gives any kind of a consideration to what me and my demographics think, and it might be the only English paper that gets circulated in this neighborhood I'm aware of, and that's a wild thought for me. So I hear exactly what you're saying, and it's an interesting point. I will talk to Sue next week, so I'm really excited for that too. Just because, like, I don't know.
I'm not trying to suggest she's way older or anything.
No,
I'm not saying
no.
about her. I'm just saying those are the numbers.
Facts is facts. Like I mean, I'm not going to discuss that, but facts is facts. It is what it is. But I was hoping, like, because people like the story elements and stuff of like you kind of like your life in chapters almost. I was
all right.
Hoping you could like run us back to like where you were born. Like, where do you come from?
Born in Cote-Des-Neiges, born NDG, raised, my friends. My father came over in 1942 from Scotland. They lived in Snowdon first for a long time. Then he got himself an education, managed to get a job as a lecturer at University de Montreal, and they lived, renting in Cote-Des-Neiges near the university there. So that's my first 7 years of life were there. In 1970, they moved to the Deege. They bought a house for $30,000 in 1970 on Oxford and NDG Avenue in the Moncton Village. And so I grew up there. But of course, NDG was different in the 70s. It was not gentrified or yuppified.
Tell us a little bit about NDG in the 70s. I know everybody
even
wants to hear.
Moncton was rough. I mean, the Benny farm. You had these different gangs, street gangs. There was Benny had a gang, the Benny gang. There was the Below Sherbrooke gang. There was the Walkley gang. So some of the most feared gentlemen were from the Benny gang, and they would be on Monkland. They were just down on Sherbrooke or something. They'd be coming along Monkland. So I went to the local schools. I went to St. Luc back before it had switched buildings with Marymount. So St. Luc was beside Villa Maria on that building, right on Côte St. Luc Road. It had no gym and no playing field. 1,000 teenagers in the school. You can imagine.
There was no gym.
Police were there. No gym. There was some kind of like ancient gym with low ceiling, but no modern, 20-foot high ceiling gym, which they built later after I went there. So, and no playing field, no soccer field, no football field. So you can imagine, they did have the good music program, but I unfortunately was not a musician. So you can imagine the police were in that schoolyard, a lot of lunch hours, a lot of after school. So things were a bit rougher back in NDG back then. But I managed to survive it. And then I went off. I did go live on the plateau for a lot of years. My 20s, late 20s, early 30s, and then moved back to NDG in 2000 when I had my first child. So me and my spouse, my parents were still living here, and we moved into the St. Raymond's district down here below the tracks, as it's called. And, we just started getting more and more involved with the community. Me as more of a traffic, concerned about the MUHC traffic plan, which was a crazy plan they came up with, which fortunately, the worst of it, they never implemented. My spouse as a cultural creator down here in St. Raymond.
That's it. I want to pause for a second because we just ran through like several decades really, 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 really fast, which is fair enough. But what did you do after high school? Like, where did you go to universities and all that things?
Yeah, I went to Concordia, the liberal arts college. It was a great program, a good general program. I learned a lot. I learned how to read. I learned how to think critically. That's important. I did try a master's degree, but it was not for me. I decided, I got involved. I got a job. I worked at the same company for 8 years. It was a market research company. I was the tabulation manager. So I seem to have a record of when I do something and it works out, I stick with it for a certain amount of time. I think 8 years at the same job is not bad. And then I had my own business for 8 years. I was kind of a renovator. I was renovating some apartments. In the 90s in Montreal, you could, I bought the triplexes I lived in, renovated them. So I was in my own, working for myself for about 10 years. So I definitely have that experience of owning a small business. And then after I had the kids and I was here in NDG, that's when I started getting interested in politics, because the guys in power, Tremblay, Applebaum, as far as I was concerned, were not, reacting to the needs of the people of NDG. So to me, it was important. I just thought these guys are just not. I mean, at first I started quite naively, like, bringing proposals to them, thinking they would implement them or at least start moving in that direction, and they did not at all. So that's why I decided to run against them.
So it's like you just decide one day that you're upset about stuff and you're gonna go to the mayor and whatnot. Like you actually just did that.
I just did it. I built up an email list, thousands of names of NDG residents, by asking them one by one to join that list and give me their email.
And this is like, you're not even running or anything. You're just upset.
I'm not even in a party at this point. I printed up posters against the MUHC traffic plan. I was single-handedly paid for and printed up posters and got them put on 100 people's balconies against their stupid traffic plan. So yeah, that's
what was the traffic plan?
Well, it was to close Upper Lachine, which fortunately they never did, because of our pressure, our good work. They never closed Upper Lachine, which would have been a disaster because it would have been closed. All the buses, all the 90 and 104 buses, the people down here in St. Raymond, that people up Cavendish and Walkley, people in Ville St. Pierre and West Haven, depend on the 90 and 104 buses. They go right through the underpass there, the Upper Lachine underpass. Just as they arrive at the metro, full buses, and they were just going to close.
They were going to close that off for the hospital, like block off the hood because you can't come up. Say a word.
That's right. Just so that people from only they're planning with sort of an exit, people off the highway driving to. I mean, I understand people drive to a hospital. I'm not against that, but why they didn't just build it to Saint Jacques right away and leave that key de Maisonneuve Upper Lachine stretch, which is so important for the buses and the cyclists. What I mean?
I'm with you. I mean, I lived
left it alone. Yeah.
Like at that time in life, I was taking the 90 to cadets.
Yeah, there you go.
So like, it's actually really important. Upper Lachine is kind of like, I didn't even know that. I was too young back then to pay attention. I was aware that the hospital was a fiasco and that there was a lot of stuff.
The traffic plan was the fiasco, and the hookup to the metro station, which they finally finished. But they should have finished it, right from the beginning, 5-10 years earlier.
But what's really important is that you got upset about something, and then you galvanized the community in 2000 when it was hard to get emails, because I bet a lot of people didn't even have emails back then. Or
people had emails, but they didn't have Facebook, so there was no Facebook organizing. You had to do it by email chain. So.
And then, so you linked that up, and you pressured the government and won.
That is correct. We managed to keep Upper Lachine open, and better late than never, we got the elevators in the second entrance to Vendôme Metro, and it's open now, and I took my bike on it, and it is good. Thank God they've finally done it.
So you had a hand in that too?
Of course, with big community groups, all kinds of people. We were pushing the NDG Community Council, academics. It was kind of obvious. They built a hospital, right beside a metro station. They better hook up, and they better have stair lifts. Anyways, they finally did it.
That makes a lot of sense when you say it like that. It's not the kind of thing my brain naturally goes to, but I appreciate where you're coming from with it. But you have kids. I do not have kids. I've noticed that.
Baby carriages for many years. And, I listened. I knew seniors. I know the seniors of NDG, and I understood their concerns. People who have mobility challenged and in wheelchairs. So it's important.
So I guess at what point does that go from you're like a community leader dude to like you're a politician dude?
Okay, then I realized that I had to beat these guys, Tremblay, Applebaum. I had to take the battle to them. So one thing I did, I ran for the Green Party of Quebec. I realized you got to get your name out there. And I came up with a great slogan, Green McQueen, and I put it on a lot of posters and put those posters up, and people remembered that, Green McQueen, and in French it was Vert le futur. And, I ran twice for the Green Party. I got the highest score of any member of the Green Party of Quebec ever, anywhere in Quebec. That record still stands. And then finally, with Projet Montreal, I ran for the district city councillor of the Eastern NDG, and I won in 2009, the first time.
So you basically went with the provincial route to kind of get your... So is that like a move in politics if you want to actually get elected in city? Like, I don't know.
You want to get your name recognition up, you got to get your message out, and people do it all the time. Look at Mélanie Joly. She ran for the mayor of Montreal, and then I don't know if it was from the start. Perhaps it was just to get into federal politics. I don't know. So there's another example. She has a memorable name also, so similar thing. And maybe Balarama Holness. I don't want to completely rip him apart. I don't know absolutely everything about the guy, and please, people go check out his platform, but he's certainly getting his name recognition up by running for mayor of Montreal. And what really are his long-term serious plans, if any, who knows?
That's a big statement. I met him the other day in a park, so he definitely has that I'm an A-game politician who knows he's hot thing going on for him.
Hot he is.
So like, what's it? Well, okay, so since you did like both the provincial and the municipal level of like just I guess the overall process of campaigning, is there a huge difference between these two experiences?
I would say, I mean, it was only with the municipal that I learned to do the door-to-door and really kind of speak to people, and not just preach to them, but get out there, listen to them, talk to them one-on-one in a major volume way. So that, and of course, the riding, a district is smaller than a provincial riding and much smaller than a federal riding. So, the smaller it is, the more the individual candidate can make a difference with their door-to-door.
So door-to-door is effective, is what I'm understanding. Like,
it can be, absolutely. And knowing people, again, people through your kids' schools, knowing through associations, through volunteer organizations, through charity organizations in the district. So yeah, knowing people is good. I mean, that's what politics is about. Knowing people, listening to people, and trying to represent them.
So it's really like, if you want to go into politics, you really got to run this like a long-term game. Like, you got to plan like almost half a decade of networking.
Sure. I mean, look back to Christian Arsenault. He ran in 2013 and lost, ran hard, and lost to Jeremy Searle, and not by many votes. It was a 5-way race, and Jeremy Searle managed to win with 22% of the vote to Christian's like 20% or something. I mean, it's horrible. So he just worked hard and came back a second time. That's why it's too bad he's gone, because he worked hard, I'd say, for about a decade to get to this point, and suddenly, poof. So it is unfortunate.
Yeah. So basically, you do the door-to-door thing, and then you run in 2009 with this mission in your heart and soul to protect NDG against Tremblay and Applebaum.
That's right. I had a slogan: defend NDG. I mean, one of the things, and I'm going to bring it a bit to this election too. One of the things that's important, we're in this big borough. That's that's unfortunate. I'm not necessarily happy that we're in the biggest borough in the whole city of Montreal with Cote-Des-Neiges and NDG together. I think they could both do better if they were separate, but to change that is a very, very complicated task. But given why
are they together? Like, I never understood that my whole life.
A civil servant made a decision 20 years ago is my best answer, although I'm going to add a little more. If anybody liked it together and played a part in it being together, I would say it was Marvin Rochon and Michael Applebaum. For one thing, Marvin represents Snowden and lives in NDG. Snowden is kind of in the middle. If anywhere claims to be in the middle, it would be Snowden. So he represents Snowden, and he lives in Western NDG. So he kind of, is the one most saying, oh, Cote-Des-Neiges, NDG, it's all one community. And then Michael Applebaum lived in Snowden and then ran up and became the first mayor of Cote-Des-Neiges, NDG. And their machine was very Cote-Des-Neiges based. So, I certainly saw them as the villains then. And defend NDG was, come on, you gotta speak for NDG. I thought the people they had in NDG were not serious. And that was part of it. And now I'm going to say something about this election. I think this continues. Lionel Perez is an intelligent, ambitious man. He's bilingual. He's hardworking. He could beat me in any sort of lawyerly argument, since he's a lawyer and I'm not. But he's deep. I mean, like it or not, his base and his experience and his life experience is from Cote-Des-Neiges, and specifically Darlington district near the border with Outremont. So that's pretty far from NDG. I mean, how many people from NDG go to Darlington on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? I would suggest not very many. Not that, again, I have nothing. I go there often. I like Cote-Des-Neiges, so it's not that I'm against it, but let's face it.
No, but like, I live on Fielding, right, all the way by Coronation Park. Why am I going to Cote-Des-Neiges? It's not even the same. Like, I mean,
students go to Upper Cote-Des-Neiges for all the schools and the universities, but I mean, please go to Cote-Des-Neiges if you want. It's a nice
there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I go to it, but
I think it's an okay place. It's a good place. But here's the point. So Lionel Perez now has this ambition to be mayor of Cote-Des-Neiges NDG, and that's fine because, as I said, he is an intelligent, ambitious, hardworking guy, and he has experience at this point. So I have no problems with that. But what I find odd is that he cannot find a single lieutenant from NDG to be on his team. we all know Joe Ortona, EMSB chairman, lives in St. Leonard, based in St. Leonard, and keeping his EMSB job, which is double dipping, let's face it, and being parachuted in as a star candidate into the Loyola district. And then it would appear that my opponent also, Ashley Thornton, also, as far as I can see, does not live in NDG, has very little connection to NDG. She might have briefly worked at the Monkland Tavern or something, but I mean, briefly working at one restaurant in NDG does not constitute a deep connection.
Not in the
so
least.
I'm not saying either of them is terrible. All I'm saying is neither of his candidates of NDG have a deep NDG connection. When he obviously he's been working on his ambition to become mayor of Cote-Des-Neiges NDG for several years, presumably. This is something he wants to do. He was not able over several years to develop a connection with somebody deeply connected to the NDG community. I find that a bit weak, I'm not sure NDG should plunge into this again, because like I say, the Applebaum, Marvin Rothschild machine also, in my opinion, do not have deep roots in NDG. So I'm going to throw that out.
Fair. I mean, I never thought about a lot of that. I guess you don't have to live in where you're running, I suppose.
You don't have to live exactly. I'm willing to give some benefit of the doubt, like I say. But the point is, neither of his candidates. If you have one parachuted star and one was an NDG character, but neither of them. So
I hear what you're saying, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's seducing the community, and it's kind of wild that the man can't really get the community on board. And I mean, like, you can see, like, it's interesting to watch where the different people do their events.
Of course.
Or where they're at, or this Sonny Moz guy.
And I do not go to my opponent's events, so pray do tell.
I haven't gone to any of them. I know that they do it in parks I never hang out in. That was my first thought. I was like, I'm never where you guys are at. And it feels like they care more about, like, Cote St. Luke's opinion than not, was my general feelings. And I know that's a weird, like, sentiment, but it was like,
you said that, not me.
That's just what I got the impression of. And it's no disrespect to that either. I don't know. I talked to Lionel. I have, like, no knowing of him. I didn't know who he was. Apparently, everybody knows this guy, and I'm the one who's out of the loop on this. But I never heard of this dude before I started talking to politics people here. But to be fair, I'm pretty out of the loop. I know who Sue Montgomery was coming into this, and maybe I'd met Christian once upon a time back in the day. But, like, I don't know. Lionel seemed less... the way I understood it is he gave the most corporate answer to when Mauro Peña initially spammed a bunch of people trying to get me interviews. And I'm like, fair enough. I'll meet him one day if I ever end up at one of his events. I did end up at the Ballarama event, though, and that was really like stand in the park, collect signatures-y and whatnot, while he played basketball with the rap folk, which...
What park was it in?
Oscar Peterson. Like, I'd gone down over there to...
Coffee Park, I think we call it, the new basketball
park? No. He was in Oscar Peterson Park in Burgundy.
Oh, down in St. Henry.
Yeah. So he was down over there because one of the Nate Husser, probably one of the better English rappers in the city in terms of like pushing, had set up this charity event, basketball tournament. So Ballarama was up there playing basketball because part of his campaign is to get an NBA team here. And I'm like, yo, he's doing it good. He's doing it good.
I have nothing against rappers and certainly nothing against basketball. In fact, we brought in more basketball courts in Cote-Des-Neiges NDG. We on our first one thing we did we did Coffee's got a new basketball court.
Yeah, I saw that.
One of the parks in Cote-Des-Neiges, Mackenzie King, or was redone. Maybe it wasn't new, but it was redone because a lot of people can enjoy a basketball court without taking up too much space of the park. So that's why I have reason to do it.
I really liked the Coffee Park one. It always felt like it was a big empty field that wasn't really doing anything.
It was not being used. Basketball was the right move. My son was at the West Haven Center playing basketball, and the West Haven Center, unfortunately, doesn't have the high enough ceiling. So, you try to take the jump shot, and it hits the ceiling beam. So, yeah, kids in West Haven definitely needed the Coffee Park basketball court.
That's dope still. So, basically, in 2009, you run and you get in. Is it hard to do the election thing? Like, you got to get the signatures and run through all the party stuff and all of that?
Of course, I went through, that. And, I think there was a growing awareness as we came down the final weeks that I had a good shot at winning. I had a team, and they were my volunteers. They weren't like volunteers from the party. They were all local people, my friends and neighbors from NDG. We had a little office on Sherbrooke Street. you know, it was right near Draper, was kind of in the building now that's been, you know, it was just an empty storefront, a small empty storefront. You know, we did it. We worked hard, and on election night, we were darn happy to win. And like I said, I was the only one. So the Applebaum team won all the other seats in NDG and the mayorship, and there I was on my own. And Applebaum put me in an office all by himself. I wouldn't even caucus with them with the civil servants. I would just be like by myself in this office, and the borough manager would come and give me details separately by myself.
Wait, can they do that?
It's unheard of, because I've, you know, I certainly sensed in this last mandate, we all caucused together. I mean, Mr. Perez, you know, Marvin Rocha, Sue Montgomery, all of us, even after the Sue Montgomery break with Projet Montreal, we still all caucused together. So that's the standard procedure. So
that's wild.
I had to dig up the information myself.
So you win an election, you're the only guy, and there's five of the city councillor seats, right? And then there's the mayor position. Yeah. And they literally put you in a corner, not hyperbolically.
It was like I had no window. I was in an office without a view of the outside. It's like a closet.
That must have been quite the experience. I'm like actually just like, wow, that's fucking wild.
I mean, I was happy to have been elected for the first time in my life, and I'd never experienced the caucus, you know, the borough caucus. So I guess I didn't know what I was missing, or, you know what I mean? But I didn't get to hear them asking all their questions to the civil servants. So I guess I had to go dig it all up myself.
So I guess you run through that, and then what is it like then being in your first term? Like, what do you discover about the?
Well, I kept, you know, when you're the outsider, when you're the opposition, you get to be the critic. In some respects, it's easier. I would say it's definitely easier psychologically. You know, you get to be putting people down, and nothing gets blamed on you because I wasn't. You know, you're not responsible. I mean, clearly, especially when you're the lone opposition like I was. So. You know, we try to dig up issues. You know, it's pushing a lot for the MUHC traffic plan or the bicycle bridge there, were things I spent a lot of time working on. It's hard to achieve things. They wouldn't give in. They wouldn't give anything. So, whereas in my second mandate with Copeman, in some respects, that might have been the most productive mandate, because Copeman had a mixed bag. He wasn't with Cote-Des from the start. He and Marvin Rocha had run with some other guy, Cote. Lionel was with Cote-Des. Jeremy Searle was a crazy independent, and then me and Magda were with Projet. So there was this complete mixed bag. So Copeman, to his credit, always operated more democratically, more openly, more transparently. He was clear about how things would work from the start and would listen to people. And for instance, with Copeman, we were able to get the bicycle path along the Maisonneuve in front of Vendôme Metro, the Vendôme Danger Zone, as it was called. It's not as good as the bike bridge I really want and still fighting for, but it's much better than what was there before to get cyclists through that key area. And of course, the movement on the metro station elevators also got formally going, you know, absolutely officially going at the beginning of the Copeman years.
All right. So how many like parties are there in Montreal back then? So I don't even know when Projet Montreal started.
I was always the rising, you know, opposition. I was with Mr. Bergeron a couple of times, and then the first time, you know, we were about 10 in city council with Mr. Bergeron. The second time we were more, we were 20-ish, I forget exact number. But Mr. Bergeron was proving to not be so popular, and Melanie Joly actually beat him in the popular vote, and that's one of the reasons he resigned. So then he was gone. And then here's a key thing I'm going to say to you and to the people of NDG too. Remember when Projet Montreal had a leadership race between two people, Valérie Plante and Guillaume Lavoie? It was a serious race. In the final, several thousand people voted, and Valérie Plante won by a slim margin, something like 1,200 to 1,100 votes. And they had debates all over the city, including in NDG. I remember that night in NDG when 100 people came down, 100 plus people came down to the St. Raymond Center. They got to listen to Valérie Plante. They got to listen to Guillaume Lavoie, ask questions, hear them debate, and then join. You know, many of them were members of the party, but if they weren't, they could join and then go and vote for which of the two they thought made more sense, had better answers, etc. What a splendid display of democracy. And I'm going to say one thing about, you know, the Sue Montgomery party. I think Sue's intentions are good, and I think, you know, some people are working with her, and that they're democratic right, and it's good that they're involved in democracy. I'm happy for that. But on the other hand, it is just the Sue Montgomery party. There was no leadership race. I don't remember a debate where Sue and other people who might think likewise to her had a debate between themselves to see who would be the leader of the Courage Party. Seems a bit just Sue Montgomery is the one in charge and the others have to follow. And that's not what happened with Valerie Plante and Projet Montreal, where people had a vote and they came and had a debate right here in NDG.
That's an interesting point. I didn't know there were debates. To be fair, in 2017, I wouldn't have given a crap about a debate in NDG. I'll be real with you. But like, is that is there a lot of like NDG politics debates? Like, is that a thing that actually goes down?
I would say there was other things. When Christian Arsenault, both times he ran, he tried in both 2013 and 2017. He sought that it started with him seeking the nomination in the Loyola district, and he had competition both times, serious competition, where several hundred people again went into the Benny gym and got to vote for either Christian Arsenault or the person who was seeking the nomination against him. Several hundred people voted, and both times Christian won by slim margins. I think the second time it was by one vote or something. So again, you know, people had input. It was democratic. So again, I think, you know, Projet Montreal is a democratic tradition, and you know, we still welcoming more people, and we have more people joining. I mean, we're really stepping up our commitment and dialogue with all cultural communities in Montreal. So for instance, our mayor candidate in Cote-Des-Neiges NDG, I'm so proud of her. It's Gracia Katawa. She's a Congolese immigrant. She moved to Quebec at a very young age. Her French and her English are excellent. She worked at the Jewish General Hospital as a nurse for 10 years. So she's got the experience of caring for people, caring for the residents. Most important, she then got herself elected as the sort of president of the Nurses Association, first just at the Jewish, but then are all over Quebec. So she knows how to deal with both English people and local people and the bureaucracies in Quebec City and Center City, Montreal. And this is a key skill that I think Sue, unfortunately, was a bit lacking on, especially, you know, you might not adore the bureaucracy and the functionaires and the civil servants, but they're there. And one has to be able to negotiate with them, to gently push them, to build a consensus with them too, so that we can actually get things done. So Gracia Katawa is a great candidate for the mayor of Cote-Des-Neiges NDG, and I've seen her now in action, talking to people. She's positive, energetic, confident in herself, while still very listening and used to, you know, building consensus to try to move forward.
That is one big cosign for her. I like that you're like that. I like that you're like, nah, we the team. It's not just me. I got my spot, but the team matters too.
And there she is. Sorry, I don't know. I'm not used to
hey, there you
go. There you go.
That's super cool.
Your image, so there.
It definitely helps with the how to spell her name part, because I wasn't 100% sure. But so like, all I know is that you brought up the Applebaum people. They became like the villains. I know Applebaum goes to jail.
That's a good point. It's like all those years I opposed him. So that whole first mandate being against him, I mean, I might have I might have disliked the guy and I thought he was a dictator, but I never knew for sure he was crooked or anything. And then he gets arrested at the end of the mandate, and I still remember that day. I mean, incredible stories. And then in the end, he proved he did get convicted. So,
yeah. So that was a wild like situation. To think that. I mean, it's like you hear about like corruption, and then you're like, wait, that's my neighborhood. That's not even.
That's right. On files I knew about, the new sports center. You know, files I had to vote too. It was incredible. You know, he was doing some kind of shakedown operation with people. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just him. I mean, it was Sully Zadgel too, also pled guilty finally. Don't forget, Sully Zadgel was Lionel Perez's predecessor as the councillor from Darlington. So 2 people in that administration and a couple of civil servants. I mean, one guy, you know, obviously one convicted and one unfortunate innocent, where one fellow I don't know how he got involved, but he unfortunately committed suicide. So that is tragic. But something was very unfortunate things going on there. So.
Yeah, so basically that probably helped your case a bit at the next election.
Of course, but it seems like only then by the third election that my numbers went way up. So it's hard to say what corruption is. I think discouraging for everybody. It probably doesn't encourage turnout. So I never wish that period on Cote-Des-Neiges NDG ever again. So.
Nah, I'm with that. I mean, ideally we can have a system that isn't like got that going on inside of it, because it's just simpler and more efficient for everybody.
Of course. I mean, it's the first step. It's a prerequisite. I mean, President Montreal, completely clean record, and doesn't mean that everything we've done is perfect, but at least absolutely no corruption, not a whiff of it. So
that's fair. So I guess after like that, you go into the last term and you go through that, and that's kind of more like what's been more recent. So like, how do you feel like the term has gone for you? And like,
it was going okay until the midway mark, and then of course 2020, annus horribilis. First of all, the break with Sue, that situation, very difficult situation, which again, I'll tell you one thing about being a councillor. One has to suddenly become a complete expert on all kinds of topics, from plumbing to finances to, obviously urban planning, transportation, all of these things, contract giving. And then suddenly I had to become an expert on harassment, which I never claimed to be and never was. And suddenly all these questions, choices, decisions about a complicated and not necessarily, it wasn't like the worst harassment ever, but some decisions were made and I was sort of dragged along. So I really just have very little to say about that, because I'm still not an expert on harassment. But that started the year very difficultly. And then the next thing is COVID hit. So that was unbelievable. And I had COVID in the first wave. My daughter came back from Asia. So that very first wave, unfortunately, she flew in through the Middle East, and she probably got it on the airplane. We did try to separate for 2 weeks, but if she had just gotten it, and then my wife, unfortunately, was teaching from the basement with her computer, and she probably got it from my daughter and gave it to me. So I then had a case. It wasn't a horrible case. Never had to go to the hospital. I was never short of breath, but let's say it lasted long. It dragged on for like a couple of months. With the first month especially being pretty tough, because there was a lot of anxiety around it as well. So that was basically April, May 2020, and then the next thing, the Terrebonne issue, which was again.
What is the Terrebonne issue?
Well, you have to remember, go back to that first wave of COVID. Out of the blue, this thing, we have to distance, we have to stay apart, even outside. At first, people were still tense, very tense, even outside, even while walking down commercial streets or non-commercial streets, they were very tense. So we literally did get emails from people saying, the sidewalk on Terrebonne is narrow, and when I walk along it and somebody walks the other way, I'm scared, I'm nervous. I mean, don't forget, Côte Saint-Luc and I think Westmount said people should walk one way on one side of the street and the other way on the other side of the street. So it's not like it was just happening in NDG, that this kind of panic was going on, because, I understand people didn't understand the disease. There was a lot of rumors. So with this kind of pressure, all of the council, all 6 of us, voted to do something on Terrebonne. The services presented a number of options. We finally decided to try to do this thing where we took the parking away and we had a space for bikes and pedestrians, because like I say, it was important for pedestrians too. It was overdone. It was both badly communicated to the community, and it was overdone. And the COVID crisis, of course, calmed down. By the time we did it, there's always delays. The city never does anything quickly. So by the time they actually do it, July. We thought it was going to be done in May. No, it's only July it actually happens. COVID had calmed down enough. People were less worried about the germ anymore. And of course, they're still worried, and rightly so, about their on-street parking. I mean, at least all of their on-street parking being removed. So there was a huge uproar. I was immediately ready to back down. I told Sue Montgomery that, let's just back down right here and now. But no, her and Christian Arsenault, to some extent, wanted to continue pushing. They moved it further west in front of the St. Monica's church and school, which I knew from the start was a very bad idea. The uproar never ended. Finally, it came to a vote at the beginning of September, and we all voted to take it down, except Sue Montgomery. So Sue Montgomery, hardcore to the end, had no sympathy for people who park on the streets of NDG. And I guess I do. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I myself, everybody knows I'm a big cyclist, and I love cycling, and other members of my family all cycle too and take buses and everything. But when we go somewhere together on the weekends or camping trips or, sports activities in the evening, we do have a car and we have to park that car on the street. We don't have a driveway, so we do park it on the street. You have to move it side to side when the street cleaning happens and when the storms happen in winter. So, I mean, for the moment, it's still in NDG and Eastern NDG. We have to, what's the word? Sorry, we have to accommodate people who do park on the street. Maybe at some future date where we all better and better public transit happens. Things could change, but for the moment,
a pretty big cyclist. So somebody had mentioned the Terrebonne bike paths, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Why are they there?" So I went on them the other day, and it was I don't want to be a shit deserver, but there was not a lot of space between you and a car passing you at night, and it was like.
The current situation is in any way good either, not at all. I've always favored a proposal to make the street one way for cars, as it is at Geoard. It already is at Geoard, so we got a little lead there. And I was pushing that before, like 2 years ago. I have emails to prove it. In the spring of COVID, I was pushing it, but the services were just not ready to act fast. And I'm still pushing it. And the good news is, over last winter, with a committee of residents, some more pro-cycling, some more pro-parking, some from institutions on the street, we went over and over it from every single angle with the services too. And what came out, the report is not 100% one way. It's not just build the bike path now, but it did become clear that the people are willing for the street to be one way, that they'd rather keep their parking and less transit. And that's only normal for the people who live on a street. Less transit, but keep their parking. Same thing that happened on Saint Denis Street by the merchants. The people have pretty much agreed to it. They still want to study. They still want a traffic study to be sure, but they're willing to go with it. And at least for the first time, nobody can say that the residents were not consulted.
That's fair. I just remember my girlfriend was like, she's like on a big C. She's not as comfortable. I don't want to go on Sherbrooke. I feel like it's not safe. And I'm like, say a word. Sherbrooke would have been way safer. And that's a wild thought, especially at 10 p.m. when Sherbrooke doesn't have a lot of cars. Sherbrooke's pretty safe.
We have the Maisonneuve, we have NDG and Cote-Des-Neiges, so we have both sides of Sherbrooke. But Terrebonne, and we have Fielding up in northern NDG. Terrebonne is the right street for a bike path. There's no debate. I would agree with that 100%. It's just how and what exactly. And if we make the street one way for cars, we free up enough space to get a bike path on there while keeping the parking. And like I say, it's a start. I'm not saying that at some point in the future we can't go further. Let's keep encouraging cyclists and keep having more of them, and that's the way forward.
I'm definitely a pro-cyclist person, but honestly, a lot of it was traffic that led me to that decision. I don't know if you've ever taken the 51 in the winter.
Stuck in traffic, yeah.
Your 15-minute bus ride can go up to 90 minutes. I swear it would get to a point where I'd get off the bus and walk halfway because it would get.
I'm going to make another comment about Marvin Rochon. I was in power as the city district councilor when Sherbrooke Street got its bus lane, and it had to be. Some people complain, and it's not necessarily good for the shopper experience on Sherbrooke, and especially in the evening. But the problem is those buses are full of people, and they move people much more efficiently than the car traffic, and so it had to be. And it's only a couple hours in each direction, so I voted for it. Well, Marvin Rochon, that Queen Mary is in his district, and he could use that bus. The 51 bus is full of NDGers like you, Holden, blacked up. You just said it. Delayed on their way to Snowden Metro. It's a bus route that's a lot of buses.
It is about the only time I ever cared about local politics was when I started asking what we could do to get the traffic dealt with.
Marvin Rochon opposed the bus lane on Queen Mary over and over. I saw just a letter he wrote just 2-3 years ago. We're trying to push it through. He's trying to rally the merchants against it. For a 2 hour, especially the morning one, 2 hours in the morning on one side of a street, you still got the parking on the other side. You've heard me speak about parking.
Honestly, though,
Queen Mary has other parking.
It's not
rows of parking.
It's not even so bad at the top part. Believe it or not, it's in the really residential part that it screws everything up. Because I'm very familiar with the 51.
That's where they need to get a bus lane on Queen Mary, and we support that as it approaches the metro station. It's critical.
I just know I spent a lot of time figuring out exactly where the traffic spots were, and I found out that the merchant people have a group. a union of some kind that doesn't like this.
Especially the morning one. I mean, they've got park. We're not saying against all parking. Nobody's saying take away all parking. Not at all. We're saying 6:30 to 9:30 a.m. 1 row of 3 of parking. I think it's time.
I'm with that. But then I started cycling to work, and it got a lot better. And now I might not have to go back, so it's a different universe today. But that's interesting that you just can get involved in all of this stuff just because that's kind of what you do, right?
Like, vote. I mean, once I was a councillor, then of course I do see all the dossiers from everywhere, Cote-Des-Neiges and everything else, and follow them, and that's okay. I mean, I am interested in some of them more than others, but it's a lot of dossiers when it's the biggest borough in the whole city.
So what are like some of the more pressing issues you would say, and like the current things that people should care about? Like, what are the hot topics?
Okay, I'd say tree canopy cover is critical. You look at the heat wave we're having. I've been out every day trying to, riding my bike around, going to things, and it's critical. Now we need to keep planting more trees. The borough has been working. It's better than it was in the apple bomb years. First, the horrible thing, of course, is we lost the elm trees to, the ash trees to the emerald ash borer. So a whole bunch of trees throughout the city were suddenly had to be cut down. And that started about 8 years ago. And then they were slow to dig up the trunks and to replant the new ones. And finally, about 4 years ago in our administration, we gave bigger contracts to private sector companies. We have to catch up. So now we are more caught up, but we still have more to do. We need more trees, both in the streets of NDG, especially on the streets, the commercial streets, Sherbrooke, Monkland, but residential streets too, and in the parks. Unfortunately, NDG Park, then there was that mini hurricane out in 2016. It ripped out a whole bunch of trees, especially right down into Girward, Sherbrooke corner.
It's true, because it used to be like you couldn't see into the park, and now it's just very open.
So we have planted a lot, and they're going, but of course the little trees at first. But there's another important thing: the old trees of NDG are going to have to be cut down slowly but surely over the coming decades. We only cut them down when they're sick and weak, but once they're sick and weak and they can fall on people, they got to go. And so the more new trees we plant today, that can be medium trees in 10, 20 years, is going to make it look less bad when the 100 to 120, 140, 50-year-old tree has to be cut down. So you got to step up and constantly be planting those more trees. Can you
put like fruit trees, or is there like?
We do a wide variety of trees. We're not going to make the same mistake they did with both the elm. Remember the Dutch elm disease in the 70s, and then the ash trees. They planted too many of the same species, especially in a row. They would go down the street and do all the same species. Now we always alternate a good 5 to 10 species on every single block of every street and every park.
That's really cool. And all the tree planting has to be like regulated by you guys, because I know that tree bombing is illegal, and I know people who tree bomb. So that's where a bunch of university kids take basically tree seeds and start whipping tree seeds around the neighborhood in an effort to like plant trees illegally.
I'm not sure about that. Yeah, they kind of have to be planted in specific places. The problem is you got the wires overhead and the gas lines and plumbing lines underneath. So our services, as they go down the streets and they plant them, they try to plant one on each lawn in front of every house, but they have to pick the spot so it doesn't interfere with the wires.
Is that a rule that you have to have a tree in front of your house in NDG?
Not an absolute rule, but that's what we're aiming for. And people basically are not supposed to refuse. They can argue maybe about the species. They can argue maybe a couple of feet each way, but the idea is you're supposed to have a tree in front of your house. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So like, what are the other issues? Because I never thought about the tree thing. I'm glad that you brought it up, because everyone else just talks about parks. That's all I've really heard about. Is like parks is the main issue.
Parks is trees too, because one of the most important things we have in parks is the trees. But obviously parks, we want to keep the parks clean, safe, full of activities. So there's lots of people and lots of different people at different hours of the day. So that helps keeps it safe. The park down here in St. Raymond, Georges St. Pierre, we in the last years, there was the soccer, and we did put the artificial soccer field so that it could be used more hours per week, and soccer NDG wanted that. But of course, we have lots of trees ringing it, or we're going to put an artificial field in Cote-Des-Neiges, again in Mackenzie King. And one thing I noted, that park has a big forest in it, and it has trees all around the soccer pitch. So that's important to keep the heat island down for the artificial field.
Also helps with noise, eh?
Yeah, it helps with the noise too. Absolutely. A basketball court's got to be kind of in the middle of a park so it doesn't disturb immediate neighbors. Now we're working on a skate park. So I definitely favor a better, new, cool skate park in NDG. I think the Benny location is the best we're going to do, but bigger, maybe roughly double it in size, but in a couple of directions. So it won't be as noticeable as people think to double the area of it. And brand new, something the kids will really like, both beginner stuff and intermediate stuff for both the young kids and the more advanced kids. My son's a big skateboarder, so I'm watching what he's doing. I'm visiting other skate parks in the city in Verdun and up on the plateau in Rosemont and the Olympic Stadium now, seeing what they got. I'm listening to the Skateboards for Hope group and the fella here in NDG who's spearheading a group pushing for it and wanting consultations, and that's all. I'm strongly in favor of a new skate park in NDG.
That's fair. I definitely can understand it. I have seen through Thrive NDG's Facebook group that the current state of disarray in the skate park is not the best, and it is definitely a hot spot of activity for varying times of day and different groups of people. And honestly, that's a cool initiative. I like things that are going to increase the cultural value of NDG on some that makes my life easier thing. So I want like in my utopian vision, whoever can bring NDG into a cultural center that brings tourism into the neighborhood would make me the happiest, because then I don't have to leave NDG to perform and stuff.
That's what the people to thank there are NDG Arts Week and Notre-Dame-des-Arts. They've done a great job over the years. I mean, COVID has been so tough on them, but here they are rebounding this year. They've done some great concerts. They did, excellent stuff for children. I was at a Indigenous dance, Ram Dance in NDG Park just this week. It was great. And the closing party is Saturday night, 7 to 10 p.m. at NDG Giroir Park. Come on out, folks. It's going to be a great show. They got several top bands lined up. They're really daring. I find they go for some pretty avant-garde, interesting culture. It's great. They, of course, had the giant puppet parade through the streets of NDG. I guess it was it Saturday? Yeah, last Saturday I was there. I was participating. It was a lot of fun. People seemed to love it. The kids loved it. And, that's great stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. They definitely do a lot of stuff. It's cool that you know this stuff, right? Like, I've talked about kind of just the musical end of it, and people aren't ready to go answers on that side of it. I guess you have been here for a very long time, so there's probably not a lot that happens.
I've always had the interest in culture. There were previous people who ran the organization that tried to do the festival in Monkland that took it over from the other guy before, and they did some great stuff too. It's a tough job, though. I mean, it's a tough, thankless job. You didn't worry about the weather. Then there was the year they were about to go all out in NDG Park, and then that hurricane, what we just talked about, the tornado, whatever it was, hit the day before they were to start, and they had to move it to Trenholm Park. I mean, talk about bad luck.
I mean, I like Trenholm Park, but I understand the significant difference between Trenholm Park's viability of interest and Girard. But the Monkland Festival stuff was pretty cool. I have to say, for all the gentrification stuff I don't like, I was okay with that one.
Yeah. And Sherbrooke and Porch Fest, the people running Porch Fest, my hat's off to them. And what a great initiative for NDG. And a lot of that was on Sherbrooke and below Sherbrooke and Alley Cat Gallery.
The Alley Cat Gallery is the most bizarre thing that exists in all of NDG. I'm not saying it's a good bizarre. It's like you look by it and then you realize what it is and you're like, okay, this is a real thing. And it updates. It doesn't stay the same. Like, it evolves over time.
It's musical, and of course, there was a lot of graffiti there. It's anti-graffiti too. Put up the pictures, the paintings of cats. It stopped graffiti. So that's part of the battle against graffiti, is doing nice murals and street art. And we're doing some new murals down here in St. Raymond right now on the NDG Italian Bakery wall. Come on down to Upper Lachine, folks, and you'll see a new mural going up, and of course the original mural on the other corner. It's been there for several years, so it's a big effort by the mosaic muralist Boris Biverdzik and Melanie down here in St. Raymond.
That's really cool. I'm really into the overall mural art. I did a music video once where all I really did for the concept was cycle around NDG and film mural stuff. I ended up with like 55 clips. So granted,
Great.
a couple of the mural arts are big enough for a few clips, but like all of it, like, and if you really look around, especially the western NDG part, like, and you really like hide through all of the alleyways and stuff, you just find it's just hidden. And that's what's cool about it, is that there's the obvious ones, but there's just all this hidden art that you just would never think to see unless you actually went looking for it.
Indeed.
That's really cool stuff. What are some of the other stuff that matters with regards to like NDG issues?
Okay, I'm going to talk about a very serious issue that I do not have the answer to, but I think a conversation is growing, and it's electric cars and NDG. People want to move towards electric cars, and a lot of people don't have driveways. And the problem is, how do you charge your car at home across the sidewalk? So I don't have any easy answers. You know, the borough does not want to allow people to put in more and more driveways everywhere, because if you get more and more driveways on these streets, you know, you act fine, the person parks on his driveway, but then there's an empty space in front of his driveway, which is still paved and is still becoming a heat island. You see what I mean? It's not good for trees either. So it's not, more parking spaces is not good for the look and the heat island aspect of the city streets. And our neighborhood is known for its beautiful trees and so forth. So that's not good. But on the other hand, we are pro electric cars. So we're looking for ways to allow people to charge their cars more quickly at more places, more close to their homes. So Projet Montreal has worked on it. We put more and more, we just announced a couple of weeks ago that we're going to put even more charging stations. That's the way we're going. But I do have some sympathies with people saying they would love to be able to charge at home. And, you know, obviously all those people out in the suburbs are getting the chance to charge at home. So it's a tricky situation, to be continued. I don't have the answer, but I am listening and reflecting.
Yeah, that's another issue I never would have thought of one time.
I'm hearing it at doors.
What about like the budget issue that everyone else is concerned of? Is there like anything that can even be done about that?
Of course, I want more money for Cote-Des-Neiges NDG. You know, it's absurd. All these people, and so many people are going on about it with their own interpretation. On that front, I'm going to give a long historical interpretation. One thing is, it was really bad 30, 40 years ago. So things, even before I ever got elected or anything, I think there was movement in the right direction. If you look at things that did not exist in NDG or Cote-Des-Neiges 30 years ago, I mean, the Benny Sports Complex, the Benny Library, did not exist. In Cote-Des-Neiges, the big sports center did not exist. 67 Cote-Des-Neiges for the community groups did not exist at all. So I think that one of the things that is the history of Cote-Des-Neiges NDG is that there were local charities and religious organizations, both and non-Catholic ones, Protestant ones in NDG and Jewish ones in Cote-Des-Neiges, like the Jewish Public Library and the Fraser Hickson in NDG. Perfect examples. They kind of operated not with city money or government money, just as charities, religious or private charities, and they provided services to the community. And over the last 30, 40 years, our society has become more secular. It's only normal. These organizations kind of went downhill. Their budgets went downhill. They had less capacity, and the city took over these functions. So I'm just saying the history of why Cote-Des-Neiges NDG had maybe less city facilities than other neighborhoods. One explanation is this. So I'm not saying that justifies anything or everything. We have to move that the city provides these things, but the city has made some progress. I mean, like I say, the Benny Library, the Benny Sports Center, that did not exist 10 plus years ago. So we're moving in the right direction. Now that is continued. I will give credit that I think to both the Coderre administration and Projet Montreal has continued that movement. There's been this continued, they did this big study of all the boroughs, and we realized that Cote-Des-Neiges NDG was lacking. So again, and some other boroughs were lacking too. So budgets started to move up slowly, and I'm not saying people have to be massively satisfied. I still want more, so that's okay. But I would say it slowly moving in the right direction.
So theoretically,
and I would say, here's another thing I'm going to say. All these people, there's other boroughs that I would say also have an argument for being somewhat underfinanced. I'd say all the big boroughs. So the other ones are Huntsic, Rosemont-Petite-Patrie, Park X, Villeray, and Hochelaga-Maisonneuve, those and us, we're the 5 big boroughs, and we save money by having less politicians and less directors per capita than a borough like Outremont with 1 mayor and 4 councillors and all the borough directors. So the point is, maybe we should get some of the benefit of that. I mean, I'm not saying we should spend more on politicians and directors necessarily, but then if we save money by having less of them, let's have that money to spend more on, garbage cleaners, tree planters, and, whatever else we want, lifeguards at pools. So I'm saying it's an ongoing process. Let's figure what installation we want. Do we want a new swimming pool? What is the thing we want next? Let's fight to get it, both the investment in it and then the budget, the operating budget will be added. If we find the need, let's push for it and let's get the new skate park. Let's get it. So I would say focus more on what we want and need, and the budget will follow.
That's cool, because it kind of like answers what, like, I guess my question has been to, like, in general. So if there's this big budget issue, what do we do as citizens, right? Because I feel like as much as we can rely on politicians, there's probably more a citizen can do to move a needle than maybe almost like we could arm you with the ammunition that you would need.
Perfect. And again, citizens pushing for a new facility, proving that there's a need by a massive campaign of petitions and going to borough council and city council meetings, is going to move things more than a bunch of people whining about it being unfair. For the following reason: Cote-Des-Neiges, NDG, say Sue Montgomery, even say Sue Montgomery and her team won the entire borough. She's unanimous, it's them. Fine, they have the complete vote here, they have a unanimous vote here. But what does that do at City Hall necessarily? I mean, it's not the attribution of the city budget to the city is voted on by the entire city council. So to constantly be saying we're unfair and we need more compared to you, the other boroughs, is only pissing off the other boroughs who are never going to vote for that. Whereas if you voice things in a more positive way, if you can sort of team up with some other boroughs who might have a similar need, maybe a number of the big boroughs don't have enough swimming pools. A big push for swimming pools, which involves 4 or 5 boroughs together, we could all get those swimming pools and the budget will follow. There's my example.
Yeah, that is a super interesting point. And then ultimately, if the citizens know what they want, which we might not know what we want, to be honest, fair point. But if we could figure out what we want and then give you guys...
able to prove it. It has to, obviously it can't be ridiculous. It has to be a real need and a real,
Then we get the petitions and we go and run the gambit, and
you have to have the space to put it. That's another aspect. Any facility you're going to put, well, where are you going to put it? It has to be a place, and that's another problem. All the inner city boroughs tend to have a lack of space built up. I'm not saying there's no spaces in NDG, but we have to pick them carefully.
Yeah, I could see how there's not a lot. There's a lot of places that's just houses for days, and then you have to deal with all the residential zoning issues, as I understand it. Because I was going like, where's the venues in NDG, right? Like, I'm a rapper. I'm like, where can I? Because I mean, rapping in a park's cool, but we are cognizant of the fact that we got to censor ourselves. Probably got to like keep it a little more calm, because otherwise we'll piss off the parent world, which we really don't want to do. So it's like we start going, okay, where the venues at? And I now know there's a wheelhouse. Fair enough. But I didn't know it existed for how small it actually physically is as a place. Not to give any disrespect to it. I plan on hitting these people up because, like, they exist. But, like, where else is there? And then I realized there's really not a lot for grown-ups that don't have kids. And I'm like, where's the grown-up who don't have kids in NDG/college students you're trying to solicit place to go?
Gotcha. Listen, I'm going to have to go soon, Holden, but I'm going to plug 2 things. I think what I said about the budget, maybe I'd like people to think about it, but now I'm going to give 2 clear examples of things that we did do this mandate, and that's one, buy the YMCA park. So that was a private green space only for YMCA members, and now it's a city park. So that is a gift to the people of NDG. But we've only just started. Now it's consulting about what NDGers want in that park. What exactly? More playground equipment for the kids, maybe a water pad, a more water spray. I think every park in NDG, every park in the city should have water spray in these days of increasing heat. Whatever, an outdoor basketball court or not, whatever people want. More trees, of course. So that's a consultation ongoing. And then the second thing we got a huge subsidy for the indoor swimming pool at the Carrie and Cote-Des-Neiges. So now you're talking about another problem Cote-Des-Neiges NDG has is aging buildings. We have infrastructure from the 20s and 30s, 100-year-old infrastructure. It's slowly wearing out. And there's a perfect example. People love that swimming pool. We need that swimming pool. And now we've gone and got subsidies from the center city and other levels of government, $7 million to bring that pool up to snuff so it won't keep breaking down, and it'll be good for the next 100 years. So on that note, I'm going to have to let you go, Holden.
No worries.
It was a pleasure.
I appreciate you coming through, Peter. It was great to have your time. Thank you to everybody watching this, and just everybody in the future with all that. Make sure to go check out Peter McQueen and stay involved with all of this stuff. And you have yourself a great day. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for having me on. Have a good one.
No worries, man. Take care.